Hello, J.A. Duran here, 3D Technical Director for the Rings of Power title sequence, and this is the unofficial breakdown for Season 2. For Season 1, the idea provided by Plains of Yonder was to recreate a phenomenon called cymatics, where sound frequencies create patterns using grains of sand. The limitation of real cymatics is that it's impossible to form specific shapes. That's why we had to come up with ideas to recreate the effect using 3D techniques. The challenge was not only controlling the overall motion, that is, going from shape A to B, but also art-directed to make it smooth and appealing. For the latest season, though, there were a lot of new challenges that need to match the themes of each episode. In this video, I'm going to go through the creative process behind each element and the decisions that led us to the final result. As the source for the rest of the forge, we need to design volcanoes that not only looked interesting, but could actually erupt and send sand flowing in all directions. Some of our attempts were wilder and slightly supernatural, bursting with energy, while others were more about getting the details just right, making sure they looked at least physically correct. The real challenge was discovering how to make these volcanoes spit out thousands of grains that would flow into the arms of our machine like living tendrils reaching out. We went through many prototypes, adjusting forces and number of particles, until we found the perfect balance. We finally settled down on an ever-flowing kind of volcano that would look great from a distance and would still have a good level of details for close-ups. For the forge, the overwhelming number of grains quickly proved to be a setback, as we wanted to be able to quickly iterate over each component. Therefore, we opted to break it down and tackle one task at a time. Initially, we created channels for the sand to flow through, but we wanted every aspect of the landscape to appear natural. This led us to simplify our design, constructing invisible paths that guided the grains while allowing them some freedom to be influenced by external forces. We also needed to remember that all particles originated from the volcanoes, so we carefully designed pathways to ensure everything was interconnected and flowed smoothly from beginning to end. At the end of each arm, we implemented a kind of magic drain, where particles could be scaled down and vanish. This solution tapered each arm, making them thinner as they extended towards the undying lands. We wanted the simulations to have a more viscous, more cohesive look, which ideally would remind us of lava tendrils. To get this look, we experimented with what's called bindings, a kind of invisible links between each particle that make them stay closer to each other instead of spreading everywhere naturally, like we did in Season 1. You can see in these early tests how the particles on the ground move slower and the ones on top much faster. This allowed us to give the impression that some kind of molten fluid was driving the motion. We also experimented with the idea of attraction, or if you want, seduction. Myriads of particles would try and join the mainstream. This trying to convey the idea of instant followers, where the main force would have a wide area of influence, and more would join each second. This season title sequence needed to portray a section with more dynamism, more violent movement. For this, we work on what we call the whirlwind and the earthquake. For the whirlwind, we need to get some kind of spiral motion that would work in the context of the piece, keeping the same kind of grains of sand, but instead of rolling through a flat surface, these ones would be flying in perspective. A smoke-like motion was introduced to add more detail in some of the simulations, while others were simpler, straight-to-the-point motions. In the end, several results were combined to get the final shot. The earthquake was not actually used in the final piece, but we developed several tests which would represent conflict in a symbolic way. Splashes of sand, progressive awakenings, and general and total shakedowns were the elements that we played with in order to get a result that would stand apart from the rest of the work, signifying a rupture in relation to the overall look of the piece. Creating the title reveal for Rings of Power was one of the great challenges. We wanted something that felt as intriguing and immersive as the story itself. So we played with different techniques using advection, where grains follow the motion of others, and collision and forces to give that sand a life of its own. Along the way, we experimented with different styles. Some iterations had this watery, wave-like feel, while others looked like wind-blown sand in the desert. It took a lot of trial and error, but we eventually found a way to blend those elements together for the final result. Oh, we couldn't resist sneaking in an Easter egg. If you spotted it, please let me know in the comments. In Season 1, the Eye of Sauron, or Sauron, was shown as a void or black hole, sucking everything in. But for Season 2, we wanted to take things further and create something different, something that stirred up chaos. We experimented with different distortion and turbulence effects, including spiral motions. In some tests, we had grains spreading out from the center like evil spreading across Middle-earth, while in others, everything was being absorbed and annihilated. Eventually, we settled on a smoke-like simulation, refining it to be subtle but intentional. That wraps up our breakdown of the Rings of Power title sequence, Season 2. I hope you found this information helpful, and hopefully see you next season.